podcast, and we're back with Real Talk with Real People. Today I'm joined with Brandy, Lee, and Ken. And as you guys know, Governor Cooper just said that this month is Alcohol Awareness Month, so we're doing a whole week full of alcohol themes. Today we're going to talk about how you can talk to your kids about alcohol. So Lee, we're in the schools talking about prevention of alcohol use. Do the parents need to talk to their kids?
Absolutely. You should start talking about prevention as early as possible. You could even take something that happens in the community, and you know your child's maturity level, at what age you can introduce them to stuff, as far as like, if there's an accident that involves teenagers and even one passes away, you can use that as an example and talk to your child and say, this is why teenagers can't handle alcohol. Their bodies and their brains are not developed enough, and use that as a learning experience. And re-engage, what's the legal drinking age? Do you know? Give those questions back and make sure your children have the right answers.
I think that's a great idea. Like, I don't think there's really any age where you should be talking about things that are detrimental to somebody's life. You should definitely approach the subject, especially with your kids. They're your kids, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
You
don't
know
let
better
anybody
than
else
anybody.
really tell them what you should be talking to them about.
I agree. I would say it's never too early to start the conversation. Curiosity has no age limit. So a lot of times I think you could turn something that might be kind of an opposition into an opportunity. For example, if you guys go to a restaurant and your kids see someone else drinking, then when they begin to ask questions, that's a great opportunity to, delve right into that conversation. But I do think it's important to keep the lines of communication open, to be honest with them about those things, to speak to them in an age-appropriate level. So there are a lot of things that I would keep in mind as I have these conversations, but definitely anytime get started with that.
That's right. So what are some ways you can approach the subject with say like 5, 6-year-old?
So I think when you're talking that little, then you keep things in a very simple parameter. Or if you're very uncomfortable with the idea, there are books. There are children's books that address the issue. Read them a book and then have a conversation about it. Or you can use, I love the idea of using an example. It could be, remember when Uncle Joe had that funny looking bottle that you asked me about on Saturday? Well, Uncle Joe was drinking something that's for adults only, because it kind of does funny things to your brain. But if kids try that, it can make them really, really sick. Remember when you had the flu and how sick you were? And so you can take it that way. You don't have to go, and it damages the inside of your brain, and this is your brain, and they don't need all that. They're not going to understand that. But I mean, it's just like when we talk about vaping. We don't explain popcorn lung and all the things that can happen, but we say things like, do you want mushrooms growing in your lungs? That would be gross, wouldn't it? And kids understand that correlation.
And then I think as you get like older, you start adding in the data
Yeah, absolutely.
to prove your points too.
Yeah.
I feel like with older kids, you can probably be like, hey, remember when Uncle Joe was at Thanksgiving was
Yes.
saying really inappropriate things?
Yeah.
It's because he was hitting the eggnog a little too hard. But I mean, I think like really like any opportunity like should be used as an opportunity. Like whenever you see something out of place, out of sorts, talk to your kids about those situations.
And I think definitely don't start the conversation. This would be my word of advice. Nick, we need to have a talk. And
Those
you
are the
bring,
worst
that's the
ones.
worst. You're done at that point and you're shut down and you're freaking out.
No, they do now.
But it needs to be like a very organic kind of conversation, and it will work a little better. And you can find examples to start that organic conversation. It could be that you pull out your cell phone and you're like, did you see the latest ad that so-and-so did? Look at, there's these girls on the beach and they're all drinking beer. Is that something, do you find that cool? Because I'm a little worried about that. There's your organic conversation. You started it, but it didn't start with, we need to have a talk. And
Yeah.
when I was a kid, at that point, they're done.
So just creative ways to engage them.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, even as they're really young, but throughout their adolescence, some important factors that go along with those things. So responsibility is a lifelong journey, right? So we want to start teaching our children, as children, to be responsible with the choices they make and the things they do, right? So we want to carry that up into adolescence, and then when they're adults, remind them, hey, you might be leaving us and you're in charge of your own decisions now, but remember, you have to be responsible for your life forever. That's an ongoing thing that you have to do. And things like learning how to be an effective communicator. like learning how to say no, teaching your children how to say no and how to say it clearly and how to mean it and how to back it up, maybe even practicing things with them. And it doesn't have to be about alcohol at first, but if the lesson is there and the principle is there, that if I told somebody no, I meant no, I'm not going back on what I said, then that's something that you can build on throughout their adolescence and just give them a solid feeling about that. But like Kim said, I think it's super important to be a safe place for your kids. Invite them to ask you questions because you would rather educate them on things than them get that education from somewhere else. Right? So you tell them, hey, if you got a question about that, let mom or dad know and let's talk about it. Maybe then you build that comfort with them so that it is a safe place for them and they always feel comfortable coming to you to talk to you about things like that.
And to piggyback off of you, I think it's important too to realize that they are teens, and especially when they get around 15, 16, 17, 18, and they're starting to be introduced to parties and stuff like that, to have trust and open communication, to know that if they're in a situation and they've chose the wrong path and they've chose to drink, call. Make sure you're calling home. Do not get in that car and drive. Do not let a friend get in that car and drive. Call me anytime, day or night, and let your kid know you're going to be there for them. Because if they think they're going to be in trouble, they're not going to call you. So there has to be a level of trust there.
And then, that can even go back into the helping or enabling part where you're saying, hey, if you get into trouble at a party, call me. They're like, well, I can go get in trouble at a party. My parents will be there to rescue me. Like, how would you approach that subject?
I think it's when you pick them up and you have that conversation of, I love you, and we're gonna talk about the negative consequences of this, but that doesn't mean, but I'm proud of you for calling. I think you need to have that balanced conversation, absolutely.
I agree too. Now, I guess the other question is, how would you guys approach the subject? Like, say you've neglected having these conversations with your kids about like substances until they're like 15, 16, they're getting information from their friends. How would you guys approach that subject?
I think the same way. I mean, I would start with that example and I would say, hey, what do you know? And I want to compare it with what I know and let's see where we're at. And they're probably going to say stuff that you have no answer to.
Right.
Or they're going to ask you a question at some point that you have no idea how to answer. And I think there's some value in that. That means that they want to know where you're at and they're kind of testing your boundaries. But if you are honest and say, I don't know, but I'm going to find out and I know where to find out. And maybe you both go look it up together.
That'd be a great
You
idea.
both research it
Yeah,
together. There's some awesome resources out there and I know you're going to share those, but I think looking at that together could be really helpful. And then when you walk away from that situation and your kid has a question, you've also shown them a resource where they can go. And there's a valuable component to that.
Sure. I think real life examples are a good idea too, not necessarily just maybe an accident or something that happened, but things like goal setting. They're 15, hey guys, let's talk about what you're planning on doing later. Do you have any goals? Can you think of anything that would hamper your ability to achieve those goals? Or let's look at somebody who this is what they were planning on doing, but here's what happened. This came in and switched things all up for them because those are the possible consequences.
So let me ask you guys, how honest should you be about your own personal experiences with alcohol when you're talking to your kids?
I think that you should be real and open, but not in the mode of telling awesome stories about good times. Be honest about how the situation worked, but then at the end say, things like, I wish I wouldn't have.
Right.
Or if I hadn't, these things wouldn't have happened, or these things couldn't have happened.
I think honesty is always the best policy, but it needs to be age appropriate and conversation appropriate. It's not to glamorize, the things that you did.
I feel the same way, like that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So guys, make sure you guys are starting the conversation. We'll have a list of resources in the descriptions too. Please check out Talk It Out. They do alcohol awareness and they have resources on there. Brandy, you mentioned another one.
Responsibility.org, hashtag talk early is a great resource.
And so there's plenty of resources out there, guys. Please start the conversation with your kids and see you guys next time.